There's a pressure behind my eyes right now, has been for close to 40 years. At the bridge of the nose and just behind it, spreading back into the center of the skull. Not pain exactly, more like the feeling you get in an old dark room, standing over the developing tray, watching an image come up out of the chemical bath. And there's that moment just before the shapes resolve, when your brain is working like a furnace trying to process what your eyes are sending it. That moment, but it never resolves. That feeling, every day, since January of 1968. My name doesn't matter. I was a petty officer, photo interpretation, attached for 11 years to a classified analysis unit out of Suitland, Maryland. We looked at photographs the government didn't want looked at without the right clearances: aerial imagery, satellite returns, terrain analysis. It sounds boring. Mostly it was. In November of 1967, they handed me something that wasn't boring. I've got it here on the table. Frame 394. Charlie Survey Run 7. RESANT. 67. Radio Echo Sounding. Antarctica. 1967. A strip of thermal paper. 8 inches wide. About 14 long. Yellowed now. The fold lines where I carried it home inside a technical manual have gone white and soft, but if you hold it in the right light, the image is still there. A radar return print. Ice surface at the top, bedrock at the bottom, and in the middle, roughly 2,000 feet below the surface of the East Antarctic ice sheet, the outline of something that has no geological explanation, something that shouldn't exist, something that I believe was there before the ice, before any of it, and is still there now. The reason I'm sitting in this chair tonight after 40 years of saying nothing is in the news every other week. If you know what to look for, the ice is melting, and what's under it is getting closer to the surface. So, let me tell you what I saw. I was 31 in the fall of '67, 12 years in the Navy, the last 4 doing photo interpretation in a building that wasn't on any public map. My partner at the lightbox was Jimmy Briggs, James Briggs, Petty Officer First Class, out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. He'd been doing this 2 years longer than me, and he was better at it than I'll ever be. He had a gift for reading imagery that I can only describe as physical. He felt wrongness before he could articulate it, would lean forward over the glass like a hunting dog. On point. He had a habit of narrating quietly to himself while he worked. A low, running commentary. Vehicle tracks. Eastbound, 24 hours old. Fuel storage. Northeast corner. Like a man reading a newspaper aloud to nobody. You got used to it. You missed it when he wasn't there. In November of '67, we were reassigned to a special analysis group under Commander Harold Holt. Holt was Navy from the collar up. Straight, contained, precise in the way of a machine that's been well maintained. Nothing wasted. Nothing uncertain. Everything documented, everything signed for. He was the kind of commanding officer who made the room more organized by being in it. And for 11 months, I trusted him the way I trusted gravity. The project brief was simple enough. A classified variant of the International Antarctic Radio Echo Sounding Program. They'd been mapping subglacial topography for years, with airborne radar systems. Boring work in the main. Ice, more ice, bedrock. Our job was to analyze the radar return prints from a series of 1967 survey flights over East Antarctica and flag any geological anomalies for specialist review. Pattern analysis. 6 weeks, they said. It took 6 weeks to get to frame 394. Charlie, Survey Run 7, East Antarctic Plateau, the Aurora Subglacial Basin, 200 miles inland from the coast, over terrain that was on maps only because somebody had to put something in the space. Nobody lived there. Nobody had ever walked there. I pulled the strip on a Tuesday morning in late November, moving it through the magnifier at about 2 inches per minute. Ice surface return at the top, bright and clean. Bedrock return at the bottom, slightly smeared from depth attenuation, the standard 2-line sandwich, with noise between. Then Briggs stopped narrating. He'd been going, return consistent, consistent, consistent. And then nothing. I looked up. He had the strip pulled close to his face, both hands, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He wasn't moving. "Walt," he said. He turned the strip toward my light box and held it up. The pressure behind my eyes started then. Right then, looking at what he was holding, a slow push at the bridge of the nose, like cartilage was being compressed from both sides. I blinked. It didn't go away. Between the ice surface return and the bedrock return, there was a third layer. Not geological strata, not a sediment band or a meltwater lens. A pattern. Regular. Repeating. Hexagonal cells, each wall throwing back a clean, hard echo, stretching across the full width of the survey strip, without variation, without degradation, without the randomness that any natural process leaves behind. 200 miles of it. Uniform and precise. Briggs and I looked at each other across the table. "What do you want to call it?" he said. I didn't have a word for it. I still don't. We pulled all 42 frames from Survey Run 7 and laid them end to end on the back table. 23 feet of radar imagery, and the pattern ran through all of it. When we went back to earlier runs, strips we'd already cleared as unremarkable, it was there in those too. We'd missed it because we weren't looking for it. You don't see what you don't expect. The formation covered approximately 40,000 square miles of subglacial terrain, 2,000 feet below the surface. The cell walls on the radar read like dense, uniform material. Not ice, not bedrock. Something with an internal consistency I'd never seen in geological returns. The cells ranged from half a mile across to nearly 3 miles, and every cell wall at uniform depth, in uniform orientation, precise in the way that nothing in nature is precise. Holt reviewed the analysis on a Friday afternoon. He stood at the laid-out strips for 11 minutes and didn't speak. Then he said, "Geological formation. Basalt intrusion pattern. Document as geological and flagged for specialist review." Briggs looked at me. "Sir," I said, "the geometric patterns occur naturally. Basalt columns, crystal formations. Document it as geological." That was the end of that conversation. The specialist arrived 3 weeks later. Dr. Marta Vanek, glaciologist and geophysicist, out of Lamont, Doherty. Czech-born and naturalized. Around 45. She was compact, economical, with the posture of someone who'd spent years working in cold and tight spaces. She wore the same gray field vest every day over whatever shirt she had on, and she had this habit of tilting her head about 15 degrees to the left when she was looking at something she didn't believe yet. She had been studying subglacial terrain for 20 years. She looked at the strips for 2 hours without speaking, and then she said, "This isn't geological." "We know," Briggs said. "The cell wall return signature is consistent with a composite material. High density, extremely low porosity, uniform internal structure throughout. Nothing we've ice-cored in this basin matches this return." She tapped the strip with one finger. "This is manufactured." I told her what Holt had said. She tilted the 15 degrees. "Of course he did." She said, "The ice cores had been pulled from the Aurora Basin the previous year as part of the standard program. Routine drill returns from the nearest extraction site, not directly over the formation, but close. Stored cold, unclassified. Vanek requisitioned 3 of them and brought them into the facility's small lab on a Tuesday. What she had for microscopy was modest, a good Zeiss on a cold stage, polarized light. She spent a full day on the first core. On the evening of the second day, she came and found me. The section was on the stage. Under polarized light, ice is beautiful. Crystal grain boundaries, Flowing interference color as you rotate the analyzer, something patterned by processes you can understand. I've spent a lot of time looking at ice. I know what it looks like. What I saw in this section wasn't fully that. There were inclusions, ovoid, maybe 30 microns across, distributed through the ice matrix in a pattern that wasn't random and wasn't regular. Something between those two things. Like a decision had been made about where each one went. Like a plan, but not a rigid one. Like the plan of something alive. "What is that?" I said. "I don't know what it is." She said it the way someone says something they've been sitting with for 2 days and haven't resolved. "It's not any mineral inclusion type I can identify. It doesn't match biological material I can classify. Under polarized light, it has internal structure. Something membrane-like. Around some kind of matrix. Under certain stain preparations, it behaves like a cell. An old cell." She paused. "A very old cell." "How old?" "The East Antarctic ice sheet in this region is somewhere between 10 and 34 million years old. If these inclusions were incorporated during original ice formation, that's not possible," I said. "No, it isn't." She looked at me directly. "Walt, the formation in the radar returns isn't buried in the ice. The ice grew around it. The ice is part of it. These inclusions are structural components. Load-bearing, I think. The formation built the ice as an outer layer, out of itself. Like a shell." She set the core down. "Antarctica isn't a continent. It's a shell. Something built the shell from the inside, and it's been sitting inside that shell, in the dark, for tens of millions of years." The pressure behind my eyes went from the bridge of the nose, back and inward. Deeper, behind the eyes themselves, pressing forward from behind, like the weight of what she'd just said had a physical location. I put my hand on the bench and breathed. "Shell," I kept thinking. "Shell." She presented to Holt the next morning, laid out the core analysis, the radar returns, the spectroscopic results. Calm and systematic. He let her finish. "What you're describing," he said, "requires the presence of a biologically originated structure of extraordinary scale embedded in the Antarctic ice sheet, at a depth and age that precede." "I'm not describing what it requires," she said. "I'm describing what the data shows. The data shows anomalous inclusions in cores not extracted from the formation site itself. The connection is an inference. It's the only inference that fits every data point simultaneously. Write your report. Include your methodology. I'll have it reviewed. The review will file it. You know that." "That'll be all, Doctor. When this gets out," she said quietly, "and it will get out, Harold. Whether through us or through the ice melting. They're going to ask why we knew and didn't act. That'll be all, Dr. Vanek." She gathered her materials. "At the door, my report will include a recommendation for direct ground survey at the formation coordinates. You can reject it in writing." She left. The radio anomalies started 4 days later. Small, at first. Our facility had a comms feed from McMurdo Station. Routine traffic, weather reports, logistics, background noise. But twice in 1 week the feed cut out and came back carrying old traffic. McMurdo transmissions from February 1960. Different call signs. Weather windows 7 years stale. "Equipment malfunction," Holt said, when we reported it. The third time it happened, the old transmission had been cut and rearranged. Not shortened. Assembled. Fragments of different sentences, different speakers, spliced into something new. The basin coordinates. Do not approach the formation. Do not. Static. Then, it knows you're here. Briggs pulled the headset off and set it on the table and looked at it for a long time. 2 days later, Holt approved the ground survey. We flew into McMurdo in early January of 1968. Endless flat summer light, bouncing off white in every direction until your eyes ached. 7 of us for the ground phase. Holt, Vanek, me and Briggs, and 3 enlisted men assigned from the deep freeze rotation who had no idea what they were going into. Dorsey was the senior of the 3, Staff Sergeant Gerald Dorsey, Wilmington, North Carolina. 6 Antarctic deployments, scheduled to rotate out in March and retire. He had a photograph of a fishing boat on the inside cover of his field notebook. Not his boat, just a boat he'd torn out of a magazine, the kind of boat he planned to buy. He talked about it the way other men talked about their families. He had a way of watching the horizon, like he was measuring it against something he'd already decided. He was 51 years old, and he moved on the ice the way other men moved on pavement. Maris was 22. Nebraska. He'd enlisted to get out of somewhere he didn't want to name, and he mentioned this fact once in the first 10 minutes of meeting you. And never again. He had exceptional hands, steady, careful, calibrated. He was the best drill operator I'd ever watched work. He could feel when a bit was running wrong before any gauge told him. Said it was like feeling a bad tooth in someone else's jaw. Polk, I want to tell you about carefully. Because he was. He was one of those people you meet and think, this person should have had an easier life than the one they got. Corporal Eddie Polk, Louisiana, 28 years old, a radio operator his whole career, and gifted at it in a way that was almost unsettling. He could pull signal from noise that other men couldn't hear at all. He'd tilt the headset to one ear, close both eyes, and then start reading you the transmission before the printout came through. He said it was about listening for the shape of the silence around the signal rather than the signal itself. He had photographs of his mother and his 2 sisters in his wallet. He showed them to me on the C-130 South, named each one carefully, the way you name things that are keeping you anchored to the world you came from. We rode snowcats from McMurdo to the formation coordinates, 3 days across the East Antarctic Plateau, inland into terrain that doesn't appear on maps that get shared. The plateau in summer was silent, in a way that wasn't peaceful. It was empty, the way a room is empty after something has recently been removed from it. 40 miles from the coordinates, the ice changed texture. Not in color. Still white, still flat. But the surface smoothness was different, not the parallel striations you get from wind. Something had been pressed from below, and the result was a surface so uniform, it looked machine-finished. Vanek saw it, tilted to 15 degrees, wrote something in her notebook, said nothing. We made camp at the coordinates on day 3. Holt walked the perimeter 3 times before allowing unloading. Standard procedure. But out here, he did it 3 times, and didn't explain why. The portable ground-penetrating radar confirmed everything from the aerial survey. Briggs ran the unit. I read the returns. The formation was there, 1,900 feet below us. Cell geometry, uniform walls, the same pattern from the prints but now under our boots. The cell walls pulsed. We noticed it together, Briggs and I, watching the return signal cycle. He timed it on his watch. 16 seconds. He said, 17, 18. Like a tide, I said. Something breathing. Something that slow. We drilled the first core that afternoon. Maris at the rig, steady, calling depths in his flat Nebraska monotone. 400, 450. At 640 feet, the core changed. Vanek was at the sample table before he'd pulled it from the sleeve. She held the section to the flat summer light. Same inclusions, she said. We're inside the outer layer. The ice above this depth is normal ice. Below it, she turned the sample slowly. Below it, we're inside the formation's surface. It's skin. Drill deeper, Holt said. The bit came back from 900 feet wrong. Maris held it up and looked at it with the careful expression he used when something didn't add up. The steel had gone bluish, and when he tapped it against the drill frame, It rang too high and too sharp. Not the low clank of hard steel, the bright report of something brittle. "New bit," he said, turning it in his hands. Vanek examined it for an hour with her field kit, and then came and found me. "Not Holt. The steel has partially crystallized," she said. "Not from abrasion, not from heat. The molecular structure has reorganized itself, reoriented into a more uniform lattice, as if it was exposed to something that imposes organization. That makes things more like itself." She paused. "It tried to change the drill bit into something that belonged down there. The pressure behind my eyes was a steady presence now. Constant. Deep behind the bridge of the nose. Not sharp, but not ignorable either. Like two thumbs. Slowly and permanently leaning in." That night, Polk put the headset to one ear, closed his eyes, and then opened them. "I have a voice on frequency," he said. "Whose voice?" He looked at me. "Mine," he said. I put the headset on. Polk's voice, his exact vowels, his cadences, his characteristic pause before proper nouns, transmitting a position report for coordinates that didn't correspond to anything. His voice, his patterns, saying words he had never said. The transmission ended in static, and then, clearly, in his voice. "It is aware of the survey team." I held the headset for a while after it ended. I handed it back and said nothing. I didn't sleep. Day 4, Holt called us together before breakfast and announced the drill to formation depth. Vanek stood up from the core table. "Harold, the structure is actively responding to the drilling. The drill bit reorganization wasn't random damage. It was a response. Whatever is down there is paying attention," Holt said. "Your orders don't account. We don't know what's down there." She looked at him for a moment. "Yes," she said, quietly. "We do." Holt said, "Maris, continue the drill. We hit the formation boundary at 1,940 feet." Maris watching the torque gauge and the temperature readout, calling in his even voice, 1850, 1900, penetration rate dropping, resistance changing, bit temperature. He checked the gauge. His voice changed register. Bit temp is dropping. Cooling. At depth. During active drilling, the drill was getting colder as it went deeper, which was wrong in the way that a reversal of a fundamental law is wrong. Not surprising. Exactly. Just flatly and completely impossible. "Through something," Maris said. "Commander, there's a cavity below. Penetration rate just went to 0. There's a space." Then the tone. Not from the drill. From the ice itself, from the ground under the ice, a tone, single, deep, even, resonant. Not the groaning of ice under pressure, which I'd heard before and which sounds like a machine that doesn't want to run. This was a sustained note, the way a bell sustains, and it ran through the floor of the tent, and up through the soles of my boots, and into my legs and my chest, and the pressure behind my eyes spiked, a full, hard pulse of it, like a fist pushing through from the inside. 4 seconds, then silence. Resonance from the cavity. Holt said, "Acoustic effect. Continue drilling," and Vanek put her hand on Maris's arm. "Stop. Step back, doctor." Harold, step back. Her jaw was set. Her head was not tilted. The drill went down 60 more feet. And then the ice surface began to move. Upward, the surface around the drill site. A circle 40 feet across, rising smoothly, no cracking, no fracture, no sound. Just rising. The way a blister forms on skin. The ice bulging upward from below like something underneath was pressing against it with one enormous, patient, deliberate hand. 3 feet. 4 feet. It stopped. Then, it went clear. The ice in that circle went transparent, not milky, not translucent, but clear as plate glass. And through it, 2,000 feet below, there was light, not reflected light, generated, cold, blue-white, even, without flicker, rising from the cell walls of the formation, as if the walls themselves were the source, as if the cells were alive in the most literal sense of the word. The tone again, 10, 12 seconds, and in the last 3 seconds it harmonized with itself. A second frequency emerging from the first. Then a third, building into something that had the quality of language without being anything I had a word for. I want to tell you what I felt, standing there over that glass circle, with the blue light coming up and the tone going through the floor and into my legs and my chest. The pressure behind my eyes was everywhere now, behind the ears, in the bridge of the nose, in the bones of my face. And the columns were beginning to push up through the ice surface, all around us, dark gray, fine-scaled, arranged in the same hexagonal geometry as the cells below, translated into 3 dimensions, and rising toward the flat Antarctic sky. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I've had 50 years to decide if that's the right word. It is beautiful the way something is beautiful when it is too large to be understood and too old to be argued with. An enormous engine, starting, something that has been still for longer than the word still covers, beginning to move. Dorsey had his rifle, and he raised it toward the nearest column and fired, twice. The rounds hit the column surface and stopped. No penetration, no ricochet. Like firing into the wall of a dam, the sounds of the shots were absorbed by the tone. Maris tried to disconnect the drill power leads. The ice under the rig platform went transparent. While he was crouched over it, he looked down through it. I saw his face from 20 feet away, what his face did. I started to move toward him and I stopped. And I can't tell you what his face did. I've been trying to say it for 40 years, and the words I reach for are all wrong. What I can tell you is that he went to one knee on the transparent ice and pressed his palm flat against the surface, the way you press your hand to a fogged window to see more clearly through it. His hand went through, not breaking the surface, not cracking it. Through it, the way you'd put your finger through the surface tension of water, and the ice sealed around his wrist and around his forearm, and he didn't struggle. He looked at something below him that I couldn't see from where I stood. His shoulder went under, his chin, and his face just before the surface closed over it was, I don't want to say what it looked like. I still don't. I'll just say it was calm, completely calm, like a man putting down something he'd been carrying for a long time. The ice was just ice again. Holt emptied his sidearm into the transparent section. 8 rounds, gone without a mark. He ejected the magazine into the snow and didn't look at it again. Move, he said. His voice had cracked on the word, just slightly, just once. Dorsey was reloading and firing, working through the columns that were rising in their expanding ring outward from the formation center. He tried the column bases, tried the threads, inch-diameter rods of dark gray material strung between columns at ankle height, pulsing with the 16-second rhythm. The rounds vanished into them. He picked up a geological sample case and threw it. A fuel canister. He hurled whatever was in arm's reach, and it all meant nothing. And he stopped and he looked at his hands, and looked at the columns, and understood, I think, the same thing Holt had understood. That his hands were not the right instrument for this. We ran for the snowcats. Holt had gone back for Vanek. She was standing 30 feet from the vehicles, at the edge of the transparent section, head tilted back, looking down into the blue light. Her notebook was open in her hands, but she wasn't writing. He grabbed her arm. She turned. "Come on," he said. The cell architecture, she said. Walt, the differentiation below. Different functional regions. There are different types. She was still trying to write. Harold, this isn't a mineral structure. There is organization. He pulled her. She let him move her 3 steps. Then she stopped. It's not hostile, she said. I want you to hear me. I don't think it's hostile. The drill bit, it wasn't defending itself. It was just, the thread caught his boot. Not around it. Through it. Through the leather, the way his hand had gone through the ice. The thread and the boot, occupying the same space at the same time. He looked down. He looked at it with the expression of a man who has just been informed of a physical law he'd never been told about. He pulled. He put his full weight behind it. The thread didn't give. It was at his ankle, moving up the boot, slow and certain, the way a water line rises. Holt's face. I need to describe his face because this is what it cost to find out he was wrong. The control left it, not suddenly, but all at once, the way you don't watch a building fall and then suddenly it's fallen. What replaced the control wasn't fear. Exactly. It was something past fear. Something that had no rank and no protocol. It was the face of a man who has organized every room he has ever entered, and who has just understood, the way you understand things that do not leave you afterward, that he is standing inside something that has been organized for 30 million years, without his help. That he is a detail in it. That he has always been a detail in it. The thread was at his knee. Vanek put her hand on his arm, not to pull him free, to hold him still. Don't fight it, she said. Very quiet. He looked at her. Something left his face. Not resignation, smaller than that, and further from peace. It was just stopping. The end of effort. The face of a man who ran clean operations, finally and completely done running anything. The thread took him to the hip. Vanek stepped forward, going with him. Not pulled, not seized. She followed him in voluntarily, still holding his arm, still with her notebook open in her other hand. Her head tilted back. She was looking at the light from below as the ice surface took them both. And the last thing I could see of her was her hand with the open notebook. And then the ice was just ice, and they were gone. Briggs pulled me toward the snowcap by the back of my jacket. We drove. The temperature dropped at 18 miles out. Not gradually. Like opening a door onto winter. -15 to an estimated -45 in under 2 minutes. Exhaled breath went from vapor to falling crystals. The snowcat engine coughed, recovered, coughed. Dorsey was driving and he drove the way he moved on ice, like he'd been doing it since before he was born. And the wind came up out of nowhere from a clear sky. Horizontal ice crystals cutting visibility to 30 feet. And we drove by compass at 8 kilometers an hour, through a white wall. The columns paralleled us. In the clear moments, through the side glass, I could see them keeping pace at half a mile, rising ahead of us, descending behind, tracking us the way something tracks something it's watching. Not chasing. Escorting. That was worse. They stopped 30 miles out. Just ceased rising. The last of them descended back into the surface, and the ice was ice again, and the wind dropped, and the temperature stayed. -45 held until McMurdo. Something had changed, and did not change back. 40 minutes of driving, nobody said anything. Then Polk's radio came alive. Dorsey's voice. Except Dorsey was right beside me, looking at the radio with the exact expression you'd have if someone held up a photograph of you doing something you'd never done. This is Dorsey. Staff Sergeant Gerald Dorsey, serial number 34779-182. Calm, completely calm. I'm at the formation. The transition was brief. I want to tell you, it's not dark, it's lit. All of it. The cell walls produce light in a spectrum I can't name, but you could see it fine. Your eyes would adjust. Polk's hand moved toward the handset. Briggs stopped him. The structures go down for, I don't have a way to measure it, miles. The cells get larger as you go deeper, and each cell has activity. Movement. I want to say it looks like watching something under a microscope, except the scale is a pause, static that moved in the same 16-second rhythm as the threads. You'd need a different word for the scale. In the rear observation port, the camp we'd left behind, now inside a forest of columns, the canvas structures not torn but incorporated, columns growing through them, the tent walls transparent where the columns passed through, and standing in the middle of it, from the waist up, Dorsey's outline, the lower half of him in the ice, or in the transparent section, the boundary between him and the surface. Unclear, standing straight, head up. Not toward us, after us. Maris is here, the radio said. He says hello. He says to tell you. The formation responded to the drill bit because the material was wrong for where it was going. It was trying to correct that. Another pause. Dr. Vanek is here. She said she's sorry she was right. The static beat its slow beat. It has been down here since before the ice. The ice is how it waited. Long patience. It made the ice to wait, the way you'd pull a blanket over yourself in a cold room. A longer pause. It would like you to know the shell has been adequate. It would like you to know the conditions are changing. It would like you to know. Static. Hard and long. Then clearly, it will not be waiting much longer. Polk reached out slowly and switched the radio off. His hand shook. Just slightly. Nobody told him not to. The C-130 out of McMurdo was 4 days later. 4 days of waiting that I don't have much to say about, except that Polk stopped wearing his headset and sat at the common room table with his hands flat on the surface. He was fine during the days. Nights, I could hear him through the partition, a low voice, talking to something I couldn't hear the other side of. I didn't knock. The flight north was long and loud, and I spent it watching the sea below through a small porthole. Somewhere over the Ross Sea, in a patch of open water, something rose. Dark gray, fine-scaled surface, clearing the waterline by 60 feet from altitude, taller than anything that diameter should have been, and then descending, the water closing over it without foam, without wave, like it hadn't happened. The pack ice for 40 minutes after that had the unnatural smoothness, like we were still inside, like the edge of what we'd found was much further north than we'd thought. Then, somewhere over the Drake Passage, I can't give you exact coordinates, but I know the moment. The pressure behind my eyes stopped, not fading. Stopped, like a plug pulled from a socket. One moment, the steady inward push, the presence behind my eyes, the residual tone in the roots of my back teeth. The next moment, nothing. Gone so completely and so instantly that I pressed my fingers to the bridge of my nose because I couldn't believe the sensation wasn't there. Out the porthole. Gray sea. Normal gray sea. Wind chop. White caps. Irregular. Disorganized. Nothing that knew I was there. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass. I cried. I don't know why. I just couldn't stop. They debriefed me in a building in Washington I was never told the address of. Venetian blinds. Closed. A table. A folder. A man in a gray suit. He gave me a first name I no longer remember. He opened the folder without preamble. In December 1967, you participated in a classified geological survey of the East Antarctic Plateau under Commander Harold Holt. The survey identified subglacial geological formations consistent with basalt intrusion patterns. The formations were assessed, found to be geologically unremarkable, and no further investigation was recommended. During an unscheduled drilling operation, 2 personnel were lost due to equipment failure. A third was evacuated for psychological observation. Commander Holt and civilian consultant Dr. Marta Vanek were lost in a separate equipment accident during the ground phase. He slid a form across the table. Sign and date were indicated. There were 7 of us, I said. Sign and date. You're accounting for 4. Sign and date, please. I looked at the form. I looked at him. He wasn't threatening. He was patient in the way of a man who has done this many times and knows how it ends. He had a folder and a pen, and he would be there when I left, and he would be there when I left without signing, and he would be there every day until I came back and signed. I want to tell you I refused. I'm just going to say it, because this is supposed to be the truth. I was 32 years old, and I had an apartment in Suitland, Maryland, with a maple tree out front and a diner on Route 4, where they gave you too much coffee. I wanted eggs. I wanted the maple tree. I wanted to be an ordinary person in an ordinary world, eating bad eggs at a Formica counter. That is what I wanted, not heroism. Eggs. I signed medical discharge, February 1968. Anxiety disorders secondary to extreme environment exposure. A pension. A brochure. Dorsey drove us home and aged on the drive and kept aging in the years after. He finished his service and retired to Wilmington. He never bought the fishing boat. He died in 1986 at 69 of cardiac failure. His daughter sent me a note. She didn't know what he'd seen. She didn't know he'd aged 10 years in 6 hours on a snowcat in East Antarctica. She just said he'd been a good father. Polk was treated at a VA facility in Virginia for 8 months. He recovered enough to be discharged. He moved to the Maine coast and stopped responding to correspondence. I drove up once in 1976. He came to the door and looked at me and said he was sorry. He just couldn't have radio equipment in the house. Couldn't have a receiver of any kind. Not even a clock radio. Not even a television. And he was sorry about that. And he closed the door. I drove back. Vanek's files at Lamont Doherty were cataloged as transferred to classified archive in the summer of 1968. Her published papers before 1966 are still in the literature. After 1966, nothing. I looked for years. I stopped looking in 1974, after I understood what stopping meant. Briggs got out in 1970 and went back to Scranton. We wrote for a few years. His letters were normal at first, funny, chatty, his nephew's Little League scores, his complaints about the Phillies, then shorter, then nothing. I drove up to see him in the winter of 1979. He was in a VA facility outside the city, thin in a way that wasn't about eating. He knew me. He asked about the apartment. He laughed at 2 things I said, but he kept looking toward the window, not anxiously, steadily, with a regularity I recognized before I consciously identified it. I timed it on my watch. Every 16 to 18 seconds he turned to look at the window. When I stood to leave, he said, "Walt, the interval's almost nothing." I said, "What interval?" "From the returns, the pulse in the formation walls. I've been timing it since we got back. For 11 years I've been timing it. In 68 it was 16 to 18 seconds. Now it's..." He tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. "It's almost stopped. When it stops, it's done waiting, Walt. When it stops." He stopped. "Briggs," I said. He didn't answer. He died in 1981. He was 53 years old. The paperwork said cardiac event. Frame 394. Charlie is on the table in front of me. Thermal paper, 8 by 14 inches, folded 3 times, carried home in the sleeve of a technical manual in January of 1968. The fold lines are white and soft now. The image is faded, but readable if you hold it in good light. 3 return lines: ice surface, formation layer, bedrock. And in the formation layer, the hexagonal cells, the wall geometry, the precision that has no geological name. In the lower right corner, there is an area about 2 inches across, where the formation layer has changed. I noticed it 5 years ago, having not looked at the strip in a long time. In that corner, the cell walls are irregular, blurred. The precision that is perfect everywhere else in the image has gone uncertain there. The geometry soft, as if something shifted, as if something grew. This paper has been in a drawer for 50 years. I don't look at that corner for long. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in Washington in December of 1959 by 12 nations: Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. In 1959, these were not nations that agreed on much. Several of them were conducting active intelligence operations against each other. Several of them had, in the preceding 10 years, pointed weapons at each other's cities, but they agreed on Antarctica. Military operations prohibited. Nuclear testing prohibited. Territorial claims frozen. Open scientific exchange mandated. Every one of those 12 nations had conducted its own classified survey of the Antarctic interior before 1958. I know this because the protocols under which I was debriefed referenced joint classification agreements between all 12 signatories entered into in 1958, 1 year before the treaty. They all went there. They all found what we found. And in 1959, they looked at each other across the width of the Cold War, across the ideology and the arsenal and the mutual certainty that the other side was the enemy, and they said, yes, we cover this, all of us, together. That is what the Antarctic Treaty is. That is what it has always been. The West Antarctic ice sheet is losing approximately 150 billion tons of mass per year. The Aurora subglacial basin, East Antarctica, historically classified as stable, has shown net ice mass loss since 2009. There are published papers about anomalous radar return signatures in subglacial surveys of the Aurora Basin. The authors describe the signatures as unusual bedrock topography of uncertain origin. Requests for follow-up survey funding have been denied. In 2016, a series of low-frequency seismic events were detected from the East Antarctic interior. Not earthquake signature, regular, rhythmic. The interval between events was measured at 16 to 19 seconds, with a trend toward decreasing intervals in subsequent measurements. The interval is decreasing. The pressure behind my eyes right now, sitting here in this chair talking to you for the first time in 40 years, is not the ache of an old man's old injuries. It has been behind my eyes every single day since the Drake Passage gave it back to me. It is at the bridge of my nose and behind my eyes and in the bones of my face. And tonight, saying all of this out loud, it is moved. It is behind my ears, in the hinge of my jaw, somewhere deep in the roots of my back teeth, down in the tissue between the tooth and the bone. And it is pulsing. It has always pulsed. I know that now. I felt it so long I stopped noticing the rhythm. But I'm noticing it tonight. And if you handed me a watch and asked me to time the interval between pulses, I think I already know what I'd find.